Good morning, and welcome to Horizon Unitarian Universalist Church and our online worship service. I am the Reverend Laura Brandis, minister of this congregation, and I come to you very virtually this morning to welcome you to church. I am not leading worship, but I wanted to welcome you. I wanted you to know that we welcome all of you seekers after justice, seekers after a word of comfort in these uncertain times. We welcome you to our online worship experience. There is always a lot going on at Horizon, so I encourage you to visit our website, horizonuu.org, to see what is the latest Zoom experience that we are offering you. Please do stay up to date with all that we are doing. You can look at our website and our Facebook page and know about the many programs that we offer. And then please do ready yourself for the worship experience that we are offering to you this morning, knowing that even in this virtual space, we can provide a time that takes you out of normal time, that can take you into sacred time. So breathing now with me, imagining breathing together, we enter into sacred time.
My name is Lauren Daniel, and I am the Director of Lifespan Religious Education at Horizon Unitarian Universalist Church, and I also welcome you to church today. Today's service is being offered by the participants in last fall's UU Heritage trip to Boston. Mark Nepo writes, "To journey without being changed is to be a nomad. To change without journeying is to be a chameleon. To journey and to be transformed by that journey is to be a pilgrim." Our worship today is entitled Rediscovering Our Roots. Our journey was just not a trip. It was a pilgrimage. On a pilgrimage, you are not only expected to learn and reflect, but to deepen your understanding of yourself and of the divine, and to educate afterwards. Today you'll hear our travelers and what they learned, and the many things that they did not know or understand before traveling, hence rediscovering the roots of our faith tradition. Our speakers today will talk about the transformative nature of the pilgrimage and how it changed them and their understanding of Unitarian Universalism. Among the reflections you'll hear, Bunny Summerlin shares a lesson for all ages on traveling using a walking stick as a metaphor. Jan McDowell explores the discomfort she felt when faced with traditional Unitarian theology. And Sarah Burrell-Harrop will approach our Unitarian Universalist history from a social justice angle. Doc Simmons and Carolyn Moore also have many insights to share. Before we begin, here's a brief slideshow that highlights our activities and some of the places mentioned in the sermons on the trip. The hymn in the background is number 114, Forward Through the Ages, to remind us where we come from and where we're going as we rediscover our Unitarian and Universalist roots. In her essay, The Past, the Present, and the Future, Bostonian and Unitarian lecturer, author, and educator Ella Lyman Cabot writes, "The past. We sometimes speak as if the past were over and done with. That's past. That's out of date. That's ended. Yet try to obliterate in your thoughts all that is past. It is impossible, of course, because in doing so, we obliterate ourselves. Without the help of what we call the past, we could not live at all. The past, instead of being done with, is then the real fiber of the world as we know it. Just as the food we eat nourishes us till it becomes what we act with, so the past is always with us." I now invite you, if you have a chalice at home, to light it with me. We light this chalice to honor the memory of those who have come before us, kindling flames of wisdom in dark times, willing to challenge orthodoxy even at great personal risk, giving us a legacy of freedom and love of truth, a legacy that warms our hearts and lights our paths. Come, let us worship together. Please join me in saying the affirmation of our church. Love is the doctrine of our church. The quest for truth, its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humanity in harmony with the earth. Thus do we covenant together.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know we will. And we will get there, heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah. We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know we will. And we will get there, heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Oh yeah, yeah, 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 yeah.
Today we are going to explore journeying outward as one way we are a people of journey. Sometimes a journey is called a pilgrimage, a journey to a special place with a special meaning, not just a place to see. And your method of getting there may not be a walk. It may be a different way of moving, a roll or a drive. When people walk on a pilgrimage, they sometimes carry a walking stick or a staff. Moses carried a staff in the Bible story about leading the Hebrews out of Egypt. Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings carries a staff, as does Yoda in Star Wars. These tales of Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, and Harry Potter are called the hero's journey. They are all about the hero learning and discovering who they are and being brave enough to be who they really are. That's why they are so popular and why we love to hear stories. Can you think of a pilgrimage that is important to you? How has the journey helped you grow? Perhaps a walk, roll, move to a special bench where you found out there was going to be a new family member. Perhaps a place you visited which gave you a special sense of calm and centeredness. What about a favorite spot where you like to visit?
Thank you to all who participated in last Saturday's MetroCrest Pantry Drive-By event at Horizon. More than 30 households from Horizon stopped by with much-needed donations for MetroCrest's clients. In fact, there were so many donations, it took 2 cars and an SUV packed to the gills to get all the items to MetroCrest. If you would like to continue to give to MetroCrest, please go to their website, look for the list of items that they're looking for, and you will see hours and locations where you can drop those items off. And thank you, as always, for your continued gifts that sustain the mission and ministry of Horizon. We are just ever so grateful for your continued generosity and support. You can donate to Horizon by visiting horizonuu.org. Thank you. Love is the doctrine, is the teaching of this church, and it is with this principle that we are present for one another, through our joys, through our sorrows, and especially in the way all these tend to arrive at the same time in this tangled blessing we call life. We are also present to the joys and sorrows of the world, knowing how we are connected with everyone and everything. I am very happy to share some joys. Bob and Bunny Summerlin are celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary. They were married for the first time on August 1st, 1970. Congratulations, Bob and Bunny. And we'd also like to extend congratulations to Horizon's Director of Music, Francis Vu. Francis and Kyle were married on Friday, July 31st. Best wishes to the newlyweds. And we hold in our hearts Horizon staff member and church member Menika Padakandla. Menika's grandmother passed away in India on July 30th. Menika said she will miss her and that she had just celebrated her 100th birthday in February. May the memories of your grandmother comfort you, Menika. And for those everywhere, and especially those in our congregation adversely affected by COVID-19, whether it be through the loss of a job, loss of health, or even loss of a loved one. May we find comfort in our community, which helps us weather these uncertain times. And beyond these that we have spoken aloud, let us honor the joys and sorrows that remain unspoken, yet live in the silence of our hearts. The stories of heartache and hope, beauty and loss. For all those places that need forgiveness, may forgiveness be given and received. For the division in our nation, in our families, and in our lives, may we be restored to a new wholeness. And for the many blessings of our lives, may our hearts be overcome with gratitude. As I light this candle, may we be reminded that we are connected to one another and to everything and everyone. Let us remind ourselves that what affects one affects us all. Horizon has traveled with many groups to Boston in the past, and our adult Boston pilgrimage last fall was the last in a long line of wonderful trips. We have traditions on these trips, and one of the most beloved traditions is the meditative walk around Walden Pond in Walden State Reservation, the site where Thoreau had his cabin. Walden Pond is really a lake, and it's a rather large lake. It's circular in form, and there's a dirt path along the edge right by the water. It runs for about a mile, maybe a little more, and it takes about 45 minutes to an hour to complete the circuit. When we go to Walden Pond, we send our pilgrims on an individual journey on this path, and we ask them to travel deliberately using all their senses, just to take in the surroundings. And in a moment, we will have a virtual and collective walk around Walden Pond. So it is with this that I would like to invite you, in the spirit of prayer and meditation, to take a virtual walk around Walden Pond. I invite you to breathe. Settle in where you are and feel the ground under you. Feel yourself connected to the earth. Feel yourself connected and transported to Walden Pond. You are on the dirt path. You are alone and using all of your senses. You smell the spruce and fir in the air. Through the trees, you get glimpses of the sunlight reflected on the pond surface. You can hear the wind rushing through the trees and the gravel and the leaves crunching under your boots as you walk the path that wends its way through the Walden Woods. Keep breathing. Now stay with these images and stay with these feelings while we take our walk around Walden Pond.
Hello, I'm Mary Biddle, and I was privileged and honored to be a part of the group who visited Boston last fall. I want to share a reading with you by Nelson Mandela, The Long Road to Freedom. I have walked that long road to freedom. I have tried not to falter, but I have made many missteps along the way. I have discovered the secret that after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb. I have taken a moment here to rest, to steal a view of the glorious vista that surrounds me, to look back to the distance I have come, but I can only rest for a moment, for with freedom comes responsibility. I dare not linger, for my long walk has not ended.
Good morning, Horizon. I'm Carolyn Moore. I want to start with a quote by Henry David Thoreau. He wrote, "We must learn to reawaken and keep ourselves awake, not by mechanical aids, but by an infinite expectation of the dawn, which does not forsake us even in our soundest sleep." Last October, I had the pleasure of traveling to Boston with Reverend Lauren Daniel, and our adult COA group. I've attended Horizon for 20 years, more or less, and I've known since I walked in the door that this was where I belonged. I've attended classes, sung in the choir, gone to the women's retreat, and otherwise participated in church activities all these years. But it wasn't until I had the opportunity to travel with this group to Boston, the motherland of UUism in the United States, that I truly understood the rich heritage of my chosen religion. I enjoyed our entire itinerary, but one of the highlights for me was our visit to the Andover Harvard Theological Library. In that beautiful old place, we were able to touch and see numerous artifacts from the olden days of our religion. But the exhibits that really had an effect on me were the letters and documents about and written by the Reverend James L. Reeb, the Unitarian minister who was murdered in 1965 after participating in a Selma, Alabama Freedom March. The documents and pictures were an instant reminder that this nation may have come a long way in the 54 years since 1965, but with the events of this and previous years, it's quite clear to me that we still have a long way to go. Reading about Reverend Reeb and realizing the suffering that was endured by him, John Lewis, the Reverend Martin Luther King, and countless others, past and present, while pursuing civil rights, is a particularly gut-wrenching piece of our history. Understanding and comparing our country's past actions and history with its current-day actions is one of my motivators in continuing to participate in Horizon's Faith in Texas Justice team. Seeing these exhibits help to confirm that as UUs working for social justice and anti-racism, we must continue to be allies and help move this country forward. Another highlight for me was, of course, our visit to Walnut Pond. It's someplace I've always wanted to visit. To wander around the pond in the cool October air, listening to the silence and the birds, and appreciating the beauty and peacefulness of this place was a perfect meditation on nature. Thoreau socially distanced himself a long time ago and learned something about himself in the process. I'm sure we're all learning a bit more about ourselves and our country this year. Maybe not all good, and maybe not in such a beautiful place as Walden Pond, but we do the best we can with what we've got. We also visited the Concord, Massachusetts area and saw the homes of several authors who lived there in the mid-1800s, including Louisa May Alcott, Thoreau and Ralph Waldo Emerson, Nathaniel Hawthorne, and others. Some of these authors were favorites of mine when I was a child. It was easy to imagine them sitting around having conversations about current affairs or books or religion. Suffice it to say, I enjoyed the entire trip, to Boston, and when offered again in the future, I'd urge you to go if you can. The readings and detailed information provided by Reverend Laura and Lauren at several of our stops helped me to better understand our history and gave me more appreciation for why I chose this faith. I'll close with a well-known quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson. Finish each day and be done with it. You have done what you could. Some blunders and absurdities no doubt crept in. Forget them as soon as you can. Tomorrow is a new day. You shall begin it serenely and with too high a spirit to be encumbered with your old nonsense. May it be so.
Over a wonderful 4-day trip to Boston that was full of friendships, learning, peace, and gratitude, one place that stands out in my memory is King's Chapel. It's one of the 17 stops on the Freedom Trail, and it's truly an integral piece of our nation's history. It has the oldest pulpit still in use in America. We visited on a Thursday afternoon and sat in the church's box pews as a woman spoke to us about the church's history. Then she led us on their Bell and Bones tour. First, we went down into the crypt. It's the oldest in Boston, dating to 1687, and it's the final resting place for many of the congregation's earliest members. It remained an active burial space until the 1850s, when bricks were used to seal the tombs. Due to rising concerns over public health in Boston in the 1890s, the tombs were then permanently sealed. After our time deep in the depths under the church, we then climbed the narrow, steep stairs up to the bell tower. The King's Chapel bell, cast in England, was hung in 1772. In 1814, it cracked, was recast by Paul Revere and Sons, and was rehung. It's the largest bell cast by the Revere Foundry and the last one cast during Paul Revere's lifetime. It's been rung at services ever since. So all of that is the good news about King's Chapel. It was also the setting for the only piece of our trip that was uncomfortable for me. That was our visit to King's Chapel for Sunday service, our last group activity. King's Chapel is described as Unitarian Christian in theology, Anglican in worship, and Congregational in governance. Checking their website after I got home, I read, "We proudly claim our place as the first Unitarian church in the country, full of free and independent thinkers then as now. We follow an old form of worship known well to Catholics, Episcopalians, and Lutherans in a beautiful prayer book passed down by our forebears, and we unabashedly keep asking big new questions relevant to today, trusting that God loves us and welcomes all our questions, however big or small. We are Christian, like those who founded our church." So, we arrived for Sunday morning service. It was called High Worship and Communion. Yikes. Everything about it recalled my years of attending Catholic Mass and reminded me of why I'm now a UU. I could not distinguish the text of their prayer book from its Catholic equivalent. If there were slight theological tweaks, I missed those. When the time came for communion, I opted to stay in my seat, and I believe a couple others in our group did as well. One or two of the group who walked up to go to communion ended up changing their minds and turning around before arriving at the altar. But when the group talked about our experience later, Reverend Laura took exception with my characterization of the King's Chapel service. She reminded me that being a UU involves understanding that not all UUs share a common belief. King's Chapel is a part of the UUA, and they participate every year in the General Assembly meeting. And she pointed out, that in the early days of Unitarianism in America, people died for standing up in opposition to the established theology of the Trinity. Sometimes changes come in small increments. One more learning experience from my trip to Boston. It's an ongoing process.
I've traveled on the UU Heritage trip with Horizon several times, and each time I go, there's something different that jumps out at me. And this trip, what struck me the most was the origins of transcendentalism. And I know that sounds like a heady and esoteric subject, but it resonated with me because it parallels what I see happening today in Unitarian Universalism. So let's just back up and get a little information. What was happening in the early 19th century is that Unitarian thought dominated. Unitarians held that logic and reason prevailed, and there was not really very much room for emotion. And the Transcendentalists, they reacted against that. Their tenets were that one could commune directly with the divine, that the divine was found in nature, nature was found in the divine, and that also that the individual held supremacy. The individual's intuition, emotion, shall we say, was important and was corrupted by societal norms and institutions. And it's that emotionality that got me thinking. When I became a Unitarian Universalist in the 90s, it seemed very Unitarian to me, meaning that reason and logic and science dominated, and there was no discussion about emotion. But this is what I see happening. I see us talking more and more about the role of emotion in religion, in ourselves, and in our Unitarian Universalist faith. And one thing that's also happening in bringing this to light is that we as an association are examining our white European roots and the influence of white supremacy culture on our faith. White supremacy culture backs us into a corner. It forces us to do an either or. It's forcing us to go logic or emotion. And I feel like my big takeaway was that I am hoping for a balance for our Unitarian Universalist Association. That yes, we can balance logic and reason and science and emotion and the importance of emotion and feelings as spiritual and religious beings, that they would be both held in balance, both together, and not seen as opposing forces.
Hey guys, this is Doc Simmons. For me, the Boston trip is compared to our histories as Unitarians. That some imperfect man did the best they could. They were smart enough to realize that we had a lot of problems. They left us a framework when we thought we were ready. We could address those problems. Throughout our history, we continue to be a more perfect union by the abolition of slavery, passing of women's suffrage, and civil rights bills. Our system is made for incrementalization, and for some, no amount of change is enough, and for others, any amount of change is too much. My hope is for me to learn how to help us communicate about how to manage people's fear of change. Also, I would like to spend this next year understanding what an anti-racist is and how to incorporate that into my lifestyle. The highlight of the trip for me was spending it with my wife, and my sister came in the evenings, and after some explanation, she also realized she was a UU too. So thank you.
On our way out to Walden Pond, I noticed a sign that said Bike Repair Workshop, Trinitarian Church. This was the first time I saw Trinitarian used to describe a Christian church. Hard to imagine, but in Boston, UU congregations are so prominent that this has to be said. This sign made me think of the power of things unsaid. Throughout Boston, you can walk the Freedom Trail. Bricks in the sidewalk, as well as signs, describe the importance of each stop on the trail. But freedom for whom? One of our pilgrimage stops was Arlington Street Church. This congregation, in an earlier incarnation, was the site of the Massachusetts Constitutional Convention. Was this the Constitution that said slaves were 3/5 of a person? Throughout, I was struck by how intertwined our UU movement was with the history of this country. And our UU movement also has unspoken rules and conventions. Our movement was formed by, for the most part, economically privileged white men and served privileged white people. Sitting in the family pew boxes, which were sold, that is, higher donating families got the best pews, was a visible reminder of this history. Growing up, my congregations were always overwhelmingly white, with most members being college educated and middle class. And then I started attending General Assembly and saw the diversity within our movement. And I thought, why isn't it like this everywhere? I also noticed that there were racial incidents in almost every GA that I attended. These incidents were caused or exacerbated by white privilege and ignorance. And then the experiences were invalidated by people who flat out didn't believe that anything had gone wrong. And that's the problem with unspoken rules and conventions. It's one reason why our congregations and gatherings are uncomfortable, if not downright hostile, for clergy and religious professionals who hold marginalized identities, and also for members and guests. Although our UU forebears were progressive for their times, many of them also held views that were not compatible with a true multicultural, multiracial, anti-oppressive society. And it's on us to unearth that and to change our culture. The Welcoming Congregation is a great example of how we have changed culture. Parts of this program are to name the people involved, understand how the oppressive systems work, dismantle stereotypes and internal biases, grieve for the fact that lies were told to us as children, commit to action to disrupt oppressive systems, open the circle wider, learn to prevent missteps and apologize and repair when you make a misstep, stay in relationship even when we step on each other's toes, call each other into the circle with love. That's what the recent report of the Commission on Institutional Change asks us to do. Commission members solicited, yet again, stories from people who had been hurt by congregations and individuals within UUism by racism. People who didn't want to speak their truth and be dismissed or ignored, yet again. This report, Widening the Circle of Concern, is available online, and a written copy will be mailed to our congregation. Our last activity as a group in Boston was to attend Sunday service at King's Chapel. The call to communion there was welcoming and specific. We were told this was for all of us, all races, all belief systems. I aspire to do this within our congregation and within our movement. Even though our institutions came out of oppressive systems, there's an aspirational strain. I want us to tie into this aspirational strain and do better.
Thank you for worshiping with us today. Thank you to our musicians and to our song leader for providing this week's music. I also want to extend my heartfelt gratitude to our Boston pilgrimage participants for being wonderful travel companions and for creating this worship service with me. We extinguish this flame, but not our commitment to Horizon's mission to welcome radically, love boldly, grow spiritually, and serve courageously. We will carry this commitment in our hearts until we are together again. And let us close with these words from Barbara Peskin. Because of those who came before, we are. In spite of their failings, we believe. Because of and in spite of the horizons of their visions, we too dream. Let us go remembering to praise, to live in the moment, to love mightily, and to bow to the mystery. So as you begin your week, may you have many journeys in your future and maybe a pilgrimage or two. And may you continue to learn, to travel, and to grow. May it be so, and amen.